Hello, everybody, and welcome to Reopening Alabama, a mayoral town hall series presented by AARP of Alabama. I am your host, Ivana Harinque, and today I am joined by the Tuscaloosa Mayor Walt Maddox. Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor, for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much. And, let's just jump right into it. I know we've got a lot of questions we need to get to, and there's a lot to talk about today. So, first, I do want to address things that are going on right now in our world and in our communities. And the funeral for George Floyd is set for this afternoon. And I do know that you were present at a rally for Mr. Floyd last night, Wednesday night in Tuscaloosa. And one of the things you said during your remarks was the murder of George Floyd has called us to be and to do more. I just wanted to ask you exactly what you meant by that comment. What do you plan to do more of? Or how do you plan to put your heart behind those words you said? And also ask that for any of our viewers who may not have watched you last night at that rally or been present, if you could just express a little bit more about what you said at that event.
Well, I think before we all saw the horrific image of the murder of George Floyd, there were many of us, including elected officials, that probably thought the things that we were doing were enough to continue to move the needle forward. But after seeing that horrific video, it's a reminder to all of us that we got to do more. This country has always been working to be a more perfect union. We're far from that. And until we address the racial injustices that still exist, especially even here in Alabama, we're never going to be the state we can be and be the type of people we should be that our faith calls us upon us to be. When I was running for governor last year, I talked about two Alabamas. And when you look at the data, it's clear. If you're African American in this state, you're more likely to face job loss or have lack of job opportunities, more likely to be arrested, more likely to live in a community that's environmentally polluted. You're less likely to have access to health care. Those are just the facts. And if we're going to be the state we need to be to compete for the future and to morally ensure that every person has an opportunity, regardless of race, we're going to have to acknowledge and address that. And the murder of George Floyd, there's nothing I can say, there's not anything any of us can do to erase the pain, but we can all be more and do more to first acknowledge there's two Alabamas, and second, let's continue to work on policies that can help us create the ability to reduce that gap.
Right. And now let's just go ahead to, I know that we're going to talk about coronavirus today. We're going to talk about the pandemic today. And we do have to recognize that not only across the state, but also in Tuscaloosa, these protests and rallies have been happening. And it is just a fact that in most of these protests, rallies, or gatherings, there are not social distancing guidelines being followed. There are not people staying apart from each other. While we have seen a lot of people wearing masks, that is not something that we see all of the time. So do you believe that your city will see an uptick in coronavirus cases with these rallies and these mass gatherings that are happening right now?
I really don't know. The virus is in control of this, and what we can do is try to mitigate it. But when we thought that we would see some more community spread after Memorial Day, we've yet to see those indications. It doesn't mean it won't happen, considering the long incubation period of it. I guess it's just going to be wait and see at this point. But this is, again, you couldn't help when you see a murder like that, especially when it happened under a situation where we have to trust law enforcement, and you see that happen. You realize that it's a call to action. In the history of our lifetimes, this will be one of the pivot points we'll look back on and see what do we do with it. So I certainly understand the need for us collectively to raise our voices in this crusade to begin the process of moving this entire nation forward.
Right. And, kind of going a little bit off of that and you talking about what we can do and what we can do more and be more in our communities. It's a question that we got from a user on Twitter named Alex. He did say he is a Tuscaloosa resident. And Alex asked, why would you use Operation Safe Streets, to make random stops and crack down on minor offenses in the middle of a pandemic?
Well, number one is we were not making random stops or cracking down on minor offenses. And first, I think it's important to paint the landscape of what we are facing. Last year, Tuscaloosa saw an increase in serious crimes taking place, especially violent crimes. Why is that happening? Well, we have a prison system in Alabama that does not work. It's overcrowded. Those that are in prison most likely came to prison with some sort of addiction to drugs or alcohol. While in prison, there's no rehabilitation. There's no education programs or technical programs, drug rehabilitation programs. And what's happening, not only in Tuscaloosa, but across the state, is we're arresting and rearresting the same individuals. When I was looking to hire a new police chief, I went in some of our areas of the community that had the highest crime, and I met with the community and community leaders. And a refrain that I heard over and over again is that TPD has left us. So Operation Safe Street wasn't about the minor offenses. It was going into communities where you had situations where you had people that were a very small number of people actually terrorizing a community. In fact, for the most part, we have received nothing but praise from those community leaders, neighborhood leaders, pastors who live in those communities, because what we're working towards is to get these guns off the streets that are terrorizing these communities. You don't get to pick and choose. When we have an opportunity to be able to reduce the amount of crime, we need to do it, because as deadly as the coronavirus is, it's more likely, hopefully, it's more likely that we could have more people die from violent crimes in Tuscaloosa than the coronavirus. We need to do everything in our power to address both. And so TPD has worked very hard with the community in this regard, and we've got to do more. I mean, I'm the first to tell you that the murder of George Floyd just highlights the fact that we've got to continue to build that trust between law enforcement and the community, because it's fragile. And we've got to do more to strengthen the ties that binds us, because we're all in this together.
And I'm glad you mentioned that about how you saw that some people in certain communities felt like they had a disconnect between law enforcement and themselves. And we have a similar question going off of the prior question from Sarah Ann Hughes on Facebook. And she asks, why are you giving more money to the police department for things like vehicles and weapons instead of investing it in our communities and services for people who need it the most, like those minority populations we were just talking about?
Well, I would disagree with the premise of the question, because it's not either or. I think sometimes people say, well, if you invest in the police department, then you're not investing here. Last year, we passed Elevate Tuscaloosa. Tuscaloosa now has universal pre-K. We're one of the few cities in Alabama, I think maybe the only major city that has universal pre-K. This year, through Elevate, we launched our dual enrollment scholarship program. Every rising senior in the Tuscaloosa City Schools has the opportunity of 6 hours of college course credit, either at Shelton, Stillman, or the University of Alabama, tuition, books, and fees, absolutely free. There's not a place in Tuscaloosa that's doing that. We're funding the summer learning academies that provide 6 more weeks of school for every student in the Tuscaloosa City school system. We're spending millions across the board into education programs and other programs. So it's not as if when we fund the police department, we're not funding something else. Through our Elevate Tuscaloosa program, we're doing things, quite frankly, the things that I talked about when I was running for governor. I came back to Tuscaloosa and said, we can't wait on the state. We're going to do those things right here in our city. So I know right now everybody is sort of targeting law enforcement, but our job is bigger and broader than that. And funding the police department is not mutually exclusive of funding other needed programs in our community.
So like something that I think you said at the beginning of that answer is it's not an either or situation. You can fund the police department. In your words, you can fund the police department and you can fund services for those who need it the most as well.
Well, I mean, last year we had a police officer die in the line of duty, basically in a drug house, killed by a stolen gun. When you meet with his 2 daughters that no longer have a dad, you feel very committed to making certain that every one of our police officers are safe. This war, I would be careful and ask everyone not to go ahead and frame every person in law enforcement as those that murdered George Floyd in Minneapolis. In the vast majority of the cases, the men and women that wear those uniforms do so have a deep love and passion for their community. Officer Cousette, who died in the line of duty, volunteered in our schools, gave of his time, talent, and treasure to make a difference in Tuscaloosa. He was a hero by every standard. And so as mayor, I want to make certain that we provide our police officers the tools they need to be safe so they can go home to their families. What we have to do a better job in Tuscaloosa, and I would say across the nation, is we talk about community policing, but I don't think we do a very good job of it. And so one of the things I've charged Chief Blakely is we've got to establish the ties that bind within these communities. We really, community policing can't be showing up when we have a hot spot. It's got to be the other 360 plus days a year when there's a festival going on, or there's a street party going on, or there's an event going on in that community, and we can be there not in what is perceived as an adversarial way.
Now, I know we were talking about money, and we were talking about the money that is funded to different parts of the city. I think it's important to note that there could be, depending on if students come back to the University of Alabama campus in the fall, there could be an economic impact, a major economic impact in the city for that, both from students coming to be on campus, and again, we don't know about football yet, about people coming to tailgate and to attend football games. Do you have a contingency plan for the city and in the economy in the city if these students and visitors to campus do not come back in the fall?
Well, let me say there's already been an economic impact. We're losing about $600,000 a week in revenues across the city, direct tax revenue to the city. And as you said, certainly if there's the lack of students that come back, or some hybrid football season, it's going to have deep economic impacts in Tuscaloosa. Yes, we do have a contingency plan. The city's AAA rated. We have $42 million in reserves. In fact, after the April 27, 2011 tornado that destroyed 12.5% of our city, we had to cash flow over $50 million, and we did so without borrowing money or raising taxes. We paid ourselves back, and so we're prepared for the next year. I think the fearful part for me is not only what may happen in the fall, it's how long does this stretch out? Because if 6 months is one thing, 12 months or 18 months becomes another. And let's also remember, and I certainly want to thank Doug Jones and Terry Sewell for their advocacy, cities have yet to be funded by Congress for lost revenue. Now, agencies have been funded, Wall Street has been funded, but cities that provide water, sewer, stormwater, road, police, fire services, we're not. And as of today, as this morning, we spent over $820,000 in response to COVID just here in our community. So not only are we losing $600,000 a week, we've spent nearly $1 million providing additional services related to COVID. It's mind-boggling to me that Congress will fund Wall Street, but they won't fund the essential services of local governments. And so if that can be addressed, I think we have a real opportunity not to see a lot of cutbacks. But if not, it's going to be local government that's going to be hammered. And in Alabama, you have 67 counties and 465 municipalities. You think about the services that they provide, it could cripple this state that already, quite frankly, has services that do not meet the standard of excellence we need to advance our entire state.
Does the city of Tuscaloosa, do you still have enough coronavirus tests? Do you worry about running out of money to obtain those tests? Or what is the state of the testing capacity in your city?
We have enough of the tests that are like 3 to 7 day capacity, but we are running into an issue at DCH. They're out of a particular reagent they need for rapid testing. That's why you've seen our number of PUIs increase. Now, fortunately, we haven't been designated as a hot zone. Now, hot zones get a more advanced testing, PPE, et cetera. But in terms of rapid testing, no, we're not. And that's going to continue to be an issue because that can mask your numbers. Last week, I think we hit a high point of 86. I think today we're around 64, but our number of PUIs is in the triple digits. So you don't know how many that are in the hospital that actually may be COVID positive.
What are you doing to be able to get those reagents and solve that problem?
Working through the state government, working through our congressional delegation, but we're not a hot zone. And so it's just hard to get on that priority list.
Now, we talk about coronavirus in numbers and also the economy. There are many small businesses who have had to close their doors, who are extremely affected by this pandemic and this economic downturn. What plans do you have specifically for small business owners in getting their shops and their businesses back on foot and getting them what they need?
Well, 2 weeks ago, we passed Restart Tuscaloosa. So we're taking $1 million and we're funding the Small Business Relief Fund. It's actually set up by our Chamber of Commerce. And they're funding small businesses. So you have to be a business between 0 to 50 employees. And that's where it's targeting first, with the first businesses eligible being those that were shut down by either orders of the president. Well, I don't think any were shut down by the order of the president, shut down by order of the governor or the mayor. So those will be the first in line to get those contributions, and they are going to make a difference. Now, they're not sustainable. The PPE, the unemployment insurance really did help, and Congress should be commended for that. But that's going to get most small businesses into June and July. The goal with our Small Business Relief Fund was get them through August, and maybe, prayerfully, there's a vaccine or an effective treatment that gives us some sense of normalcy. We also put additional $3 million into what we called Experience Economy Fund. This is going to allow us, beginning in 21 and 22, to draw more events into our city, whether it's to the amphitheater or festivals. We got to get more heads and beds, because right now we have hotels that, quite frankly, are in the single digits when it comes to occupancy. That is startling. And so we want to create more events, so when we do get back to some sense of normalcy, that people come to Tuscaloosa and spend their money, because that's going to be the best way we can help our small businesses continue to stay open. And that's the key right now. It's almost like the NCAA basketball tournament, survive and advance. This is where we are. And I wouldn't be surprised if we don't have to come back again sometime in the fall and do another round to keep our small businesses open in Tuscaloosa. I will say, and I apologize for going long on this answer, Tuscaloosa, I would say the beaches, and Auburn, we're in Opelika, we're in a unique situation, because especially Auburn, Opelika, and Tuscaloosa, not only did the shutdown impacted us, we lost 27,000 students left our city for 3 months. That's larger than 23 other cities in Alabama. So you lose about $500 million of economic spending. Auburn's in the same boat. In fact, their percentage-wise is even higher. That is, even without the shutdown, that creates an immediate economic depression in your community.
I'm glad you mentioned that. And I'm glad you mentioned about talking about, maybe there will be another round of help in the fall, because you talk about these hotels, restaurants, things like that really make money during the fall when people flock to Tuscaloosa to stay for games, for football games. Even if people are more local, they might not stay overnight, but they eat and they drink and they provide business to those small business owners. That could be a devastating time for these business owners who maybe right now that's how they're getting afloat. It's just praying and hoping that the fall is better. But if it's not, that's a really big possibility that a lot of those businesses would have to close their doors. Correct?
It would be correct. It would be catastrophic. I mean, you can't mask it. There's no ray of sunshine you can try to spotlight on that. If we don't have football season, if we don't have a traditional fall, it will be devastating to Tuscaloosa's economy. Probably in many ways, Auburn and Opelika would probably have a very similar financial outlook, but it would be devastating, and there's no way to sugarcoat it.
I know that we have a question from our presenting sponsor, AARP of Alabama, and somebody from their agency is actually going to come and ask you that directly. So we will bring her in right now.
Thank you, Ivana. Hi, Mayor. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Candy Williams. I'm the State Director for AARP Alabama, and I have a two-part question for you. One, how have senior services been affected during this time? And what is being done to make sure our older, more vulnerable adults have access to what they need as you continue to reopen?
There's no doubt seniors have been impacted by this. Number one is that we have, through our EMS, reached out to the various different senior programs in Tuscaloosa and ensured that we had a nexus with them, so that if we do have issues of spread, that we're able to address those fairly quickly. And we've done that. Last week we had a huge amount of institutional spread, mostly in centers designed for our seniors. And so we've worked closely, and I've got to give the state a great amount of credit for working with us, have been able to address those. The second is just being available, whether it's through the Zoom and things like that, to be able to communicate directly with our constituents, holding virtual town hall meetings, doing the things as much as possible that we can almost over communicate. My parents are in their late 70s, live here in Tuscaloosa. And I tend to use that as a mark to see if I'm doing the things that they understand the importance of this. And I feel like we have, because we do know through the data that our seniors are really vulnerable to the coronavirus. So we're trying to do our part to make certain that everybody in our community stays safe.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Candy, for coming on and asking that question. I know a lot of people, that is a big deal to a lot of our community, especially to our most vulnerable citizens. Excuse me. I got another question for you, Mayor, that we've had several people ask. And this has to do with, we talk about businesses and the impact that they're facing, unfortunately. But if the coronavirus numbers keep going up, if there is an uptick in cases, would you have to, or have you designed a plan in case these businesses must close their doors again? And in that case, when would you make that call?
Well, we continue to have daily briefings from DCH Regional Medical Center. And so protecting the healthcare center from the very beginning has been our charge. The reason why we acted really ahead of most in Alabama was because we need to give our healthcare system time to prepare, whether it was stockpiling PPE, reconfiguring the facilities to make certain we could house the patients. We accomplished that. We also were able to mitigate the spread, which bought us time. But if we see a situation that our healthcare system becomes in jeopardy, we do have step back plans in place. Now, again, this morning in my briefing with DCH, I do not see that in the foreseeable future. Right now, we're able to handle both the institutional spread and the community spread because we had the time to prepare. But ultimately, if we do feel like our healthcare system's in jeopardy, that first marker is going to be hit by DCH. We understand that they come to us and say, City of Tuscaloosa, we're worried about our capacity, and we feel like in 7 to 10 days with current trends, we may be over capacity. We certainly would take action. Now, I do have a concern even with that because we have an Achilles heel in this plan. DCH serves 11 counties. Many of those counties are in the Black Belt and have been affected by hospital closures. And so you worry that what's happening in other counties come into your basin, so to speak. And so even if we take action here, if you continue to have high community spread in other surrounding counties without healthcare networks, that could be something that could negatively impact DCH. So we're watching those county numbers as well. Hopefully that we not only will see signs within our own county, but also be able to see signs in the other county. But again, this is about protecting. There's nothing that Kay Ivey or Walt Maddox or President Trump can do to probably protect someone individually from getting the coronavirus. But what we can do at our respective levels of government is make certain that our healthcare system is prepared to meet that. And so that's our goal at the City of Tuscaloosa, to protect that healthcare system that ultimately protects our citizens.
You said that DCH serves 11 counties. Do you know currently the number of patients that are coronavirus positive in the ICU at DCH? And do you know what their capacity is?
The capacity is a little bit, their overall capacity is around 700 to 800 beds, depending upon how they want to configure. But they can actually create more capacity because right now they do not use rooms that you could actually use for semi-private rooms. They've also done some reconfiguration to be able to create more ICU beds. So we do think there's another probably 100 to 200 above that could be done on the site. We have a med-surg plan, the city and DCH. So if we felt that the additional capacity was threatened, we have alternate plans for additional facilities that could be stood up. So I feel very confident that we have a medical surge plan that works. My fear last week was we were seeing this institutional spread. And so what my fear was is if we had a community spread leveled on top of that, then that could create a lot of pressure. This week, the community spread, although still there, make no mistake, it's still there, it's not growing as rapidly. The community spread seems still about flatlined. So if those trends continue, we should be in good shape. But as I just reminded our team members, I just came from a meeting, is we've got to stay situationally aware because the virus, as Dr. Fauci says, dictates the timetable. So I think the real, and I'm going to go down a rabbit hole here for a second, but the real fear with this is that none of us can predict this. It's like saying, will it be raining 39 days from now? None of us know. And I think everyone, and I understand it too. I mean, I want to know a finality to this, but my concern is there is no finality to it. We're just going to go day by day until there's a vaccine or an effective treatment. And I think right now, all we can do is control the things we can control. And that is for the city, keeping our healthcare system viable and doing everything within our power to keep our small businesses going.
I have two more questions for you, Mr. Mayor, and then I know you're busy, and we'll let you off the hook here. But we have one question from a viewer who was not able to join us personally, but she did send in her question through email, and she asks. I'm just waiting for our producer here. She asked. This is Barbara, and she asked Mayor Maddox, "Are you planning to run for state office again?"
I've been cured of that in the short term. I have no plans to run in 2022. Beyond that, I think it's impossible to know. I really enjoyed my experience spending 18 months across the great state of Alabama, and it was an amazing time in my family's life. But I've never been happier serving than I am right now, and I'm having a lot of fun as mayor. I have an election coming up in 10 months, and that's the only election that, frankly, I'm concerned about. Again, it was an honor to run statewide, and I may do it again in the future, but I will not be doing it in 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And finally, I have a question that I'm asking all of our mayors that join us in our series, and that is, what grade would you give Governor Kay Ivey on her handling of the coronavirus pandemic?
You set me up with that one. Well, I would give the governor high marks. I think it'd be unfair to give a grade because I worry about how that would be translated by certain people. But I will say this. In fact, I've got a phone call with the governor in just a few minutes. We've been playing phone tag today. The governor has, in my opinion, gone out of her way to help mayors like me and mayors of the major cities in Alabama. We certainly were political opponents, and we certainly have different policy disagreements. But I know that in my conversation with Governor Ivey, she has been nothing but caring about the people of Tuscaloosa and making certain that our city and our community have resources. By the way, we're all imperfect. We're all going to make decisions in this journey that are not going to be right. But if we do it with the conviction of helping people, as Teddy Roosevelt said, where there's effort, there's error. We're not going to get it 100% right. But our conviction has been about helping people. And so I give the governor high marks for it, and she deserves credit because in many cases she has taken steps that were probably more restrictive than some of her colleagues in other states. So it's a tough job to balance. I can tell you that Sand Mountain is a lot different than the Gulf Coast, and the needs of the Black Belt can be different than the needs of the Wiregrass. And so managing all that, I think she's done a really good job.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Mayor, and thank all of you for joining us today in the second installment of our Mayoral Town Hall series. And we will thank you again, Mayor Maddox, and we will see everybody next week for our third installment of Reopening Alabama, a Mayoral Town Hall series presented by AARP of Alabama. Thank you for tuning in.